In early 2025, Trump administration initiated a comprehensive dismantling of the U.S. Agency for International Development, significantly reducing its workforce and freezing foreign aid programs. This move involved placing over 2,000 Usaid employees on administrative leave, leaving fewer than 300 staff members active out of approximately 8,000. The administration justified these actions as a cost-saving measures and efforts to realign foreign aid with its policy objectives. However, critics argue that this dismantling jeopardizes critical global humanitarian initiatives, including food distribution, vaccination programs, and disease prevention efforts. A federal judge temporarily blocked the mass furloughs, but the future of Usaid remains uncertain as legal and political challenges continue. How might this ongoing situation around the agency affect on important projects in Uzbekistan? We have connected with the journalist at Voice of America, Navbahor Imamova, to get more details on these affairs. Good evening, Navbahor. Thank you for joining us. The administration has targeted Usaid, in particular saying that the agency's spending is totally unexplainable, and has signed out certain projects as examples of how the agency is, in its view, wasting taxpayers' money. How true are these accusations?
We don't know. What we have been covering as the Voice of America is that the USAID has been guttered in a way that it has, to a large extent, stopped its work. But the review continues. And the State Department, Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says that the agency will now function under the supervision of the department, that it is part of the State Department. And we know that the majority of its employees have been put on leave. And then the federal court has blocked the Trump administration to take further action in terms of, firing or laying the employees of this agency off. So at this very point, everything is under review. And whatever the agency has been doing so far, its reports are out. And there is a congressional review of these programs every year. So the members of the U.S. Congress, of course, the majority, they are Republicans, but Democrats also have a substantial power there, role. And they've been saying that we have approved the work of the USAID. We have appropriated funds for its programs around the world. So it's our job to review their work. It's our job to make sure, to ensure that they meet the U.S. interests. But the Trump administration insists that most of these programs, at least what we've been hearing from the officials, they don't meet the American interests based standards. So we will ensure that, they say, and until that happens, you won't really see a fully functional USAID. But we also know that Secretary Rubio has waived dozens and dozens of programs that continue because they focus on humanitarian aid, on delivering humanitarian aid. They focus on some critical tasks. So it's not like the USAID has fully stopped functioning. Some parts of it continue to work. And as review continues, as these investigations continue into the work of this agency, it's really hard to say what happens ultimately. But we are constantly hearing from the administration that the agency has not been liquidated as being reported, especially by international media and especially by the Russian media, by the way, and that this is a reform process and everybody should just sit and watch what happens. At the same time, of course, the employees of the USAID have their own unions, trade unions, so they continue their fight for justice, as they put it, and the issue has been already considered by federal courts, and there is an order from those courts to overhaul the process, that does not allow, that blocks the Trump administration, as I said earlier, from taking further action.
So that means that the majority of people are supporting Usaid.
The USAID supporters have been out on the streets in Washington for days now. There are protests in Washington every day, especially in front of the USAID headquarters, in front of the White House, in front of the Treasury Department, in front of the Department of Education, in front of the Capitol. These have become very usual, regular occurrences. The civil society, America's NGOs are out because their work are affected by the freeze of the U.S. foreign aid. And as part of it is what's happening to the USAID. And I have to tell you, we are also finding out, unsurprisingly, I mean, this is something that we've known all along as journalists, a lot of Americans had no idea about the USAID or the US Foreign Service programs because they don't necessarily deal with it on a day-to-day basis. And among the US media, I would probably say proudly that Voice of America is probably one of the really few media outlets here that regularly focus on the work of the USAID, regularly cover US foreign aid, where it goes, how it goes, who spends it, why it spends it, who are the people behind it, who are being funded by these programs, who are getting assisted. So we cover these issues from here, from various regions, from various countries, including from Central Asia. So right now, this focus on the USAID, this focus, ongoing attention on the US Foreign Service is very interesting to watch because Americans are discussing these issues, something that many of them had no understanding, no perceptions, on. I was reading over the weekend how farmers across the United States are unhappy about these developments in Washington because their products apparently are purchased by the USAID as part of the assistance to the rest of the world. Food products and various services are bought to deliver this aid to the rest of the world. So definitely American economy is also affected by this. So that then awakens a lot of Americans to what's happening. And we've been hearing, obviously, not just in Washington, but from across the United States, concerns, but at the same time, cheers. I mean, we just found out through a CBS channel's survey that President Trump has at this point about 53% approval, job approval, which is by American standards is a really good rating. So the White House strongly believes that it's on the right track. And Trump supporters believe that he's on the right track. But if you ask the opposition, the Democrats, liberals, they're not happy. So that's basically the current picture here.
Well, that's interesting. Well, my last but not least question, of course, relates to Uzbekistan. As you have mentioned earlier, USAID has a number of projects across the world that are connected with humanitarian aid, support to education sector, health and society. Uzbekistan is among those countries which USAID supports in these areas. Considering current events, in your view, what will happen to the projects in the country?
No one I know denies that Uzbekistan or the neighboring countries will not be affected by this. When you look at the USAID's work, the funding record around the world, Central Asia isn't one of those regions which enjoys the highest spendings. So we know that since the years of independence, since the early 1990s, the USAID has spent billions of dollars to support education, healthcare, social development, economic development, political development of the region. And its programs are public record. So if the website is open, the USAID website, you can easily find out how much has been spent where and for what. And lately, especially in the last 2-3 years, the USAID had expanded its mission in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. In Uzbekistan, specifically, the USAID consistently stressed, reiterated that it supports the reform process led by President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, and its programs were geared to assist that complex process. So the money was being directed to improve the healthcare services, to improve the educational sector, to support entrepreneurial sphere in Uzbekistan, to support small and medium-sized businesses, to boost the rule of law, to achieve judiciary independence. And some of these can easily be criticized as political missions, right? By outside players, by outside actors, especially when it comes to the rule of law, to supporting civil society. But compared to those, let's say, political development oriented programs, the USAID was definitely spending more on Uzbekistan's healthcare, education sector, on training, and supporting the government's agendas. So again, the USAID wasn't. Over the years, we have discussed these programs with both US officials and Central Asian officials who work together, and they have constantly told us that they are based on mutual interests, including in Tajikistan, including in even Turkmenistan, which is considered one of the closed regimes in the world. I recently talked with Ambassador Matthew Klimov, who used to be America's top diplomat in Ashgabat until last summer. And he also told me that the USAID projects in Turkmenistan were very welcome. So, so far, the US administrations valued the USAID's efforts in the region. And they've never denied that there are disagreements, that some projects were not necessarily welcomed by the governments, and then the authorities would let them know. But in general, the USAID wouldn't work in any country if the state did not allow. So the fact that the missions in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan expanded were based on the dialogue, on the partnerships between these countries. As you know, Uzbekistan is a strategic partner of the United States. It has been so since the early 2000s. It's a very exclaimed statement by both governments. They, on a day-to-day basis, remind us that Washington supports the sovereignty, independence, and the territorial integrity of Uzbekistan. And any project, any program is geared to support that position. So right now, what we need to see is to what extent those existing programs that the US was carrying out in Uzbekistan and in the rest of Central Asia meet Trump administration's standards that are, as we hear, based on America First agenda. So what educational programs, what healthcare programs, if at all, are left at the end of this review will be something very interesting to watch. And as you know, the foreign aid is frozen for the next 3 months. The freeze started at the end of January. So all these programs are halted now. And if everything goes as the White House says, then towards the end of this spring, we should be able to see what is left and what's not.
Thank you, Navbahor, for this productive conversation.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.